Everybody, welcome back. Steve in the Pinball Room. What's up, Internet? As our good friend Mr. Jackson Dangerous would say. Anyway, wow, it's been a while since I posted a video, and I was going through, and I've got like 2 weeks worth of time lapse and all this video of everything I've been doing, and I was going through it all, and I'm editing the video, I'm putting it together, and I'm up to, wow, I'm barely like a third of the way through my footage. I'm up to like 29 minutes already. Like, how much am I just yapping on about nothing important? And I've kind of felt like over the last 6 months or so, I kind of feel like I lost a little bit of kind of just the, maybe a little bit of the energy and kind of the way I just originally went through my videos, a little more concise, a little more just to it. And I've got so much to cover of like, yeah, how do I do this in like less than like an hour and a half or something, right? Through my normal method, right? Where I kind of document, talk, throw up my little stickers on the video about what I learned in the moment, etc. And I think there's value in that, but at the same time, like, man, an hour and a half video, when all I've been talking about really is rewiring my playfield and doing game code updates, that's an hour and a half. It's probably gonna be a little boring. So let's just go through. I'm gonna make this like 15 minutes. I'm gonna try to make this video way better, more to the point. It is now August 17th, and this is where we're at. We have a final wiring harness all set up on the final Whitewood with all of our insert lighting. Everything is ready to go to put in, turn it on, and make sure that there's no smoke. Hopefully everything's been wired correctly. I've checked and double checked and triple checked, but as you know, there's no guarantee, right? Okay, so yeah, what have I been up to since the last video, which has been 49 days ago at this point? Wow. So I was doing a lot of game code, as you saw in that last video, and I continued doing more. Basically, all of July was me working on coding. I've got a lot done there, okay? And then the last couple of weeks has been me going through and tearing down the old Whitewood, building up the new Whitewood, rewiring everything, getting final locations for everything, including the lighting, all the way down to our final harnesses that have easy disconnects here at the back of the playfield so it can just come in and out. We've redone things in the back box. All of our power and everything is now up inside here, okay? We've got our speakers, we've got our screen, we've got our holders for a speaker, we've got our amp, we've got our power supplies, our nano, everything is up inside here. Everything is properly grounded, so it passes all those checks, you know. We got some final things 3D printed. Had some issues with my 3D printer for the last week. That kind of slowed me down on a handful of things. So we got kind of a hodgepodge of black and gray filament. But we are, guys, we're so close. Like, I can't wait to turn this thing on and actually start playtesting this thing. All right, so but before we do that, that's gonna be the very next video, which hopefully will be out here in just a few more days, like the very next week. I'm gonna try to follow up really, really fast. All right, so a few of the things I learned along the way as I was going through and doing this. One, I never thought I'd go through nearly 1,000 zip ties, but this is a bag of 1,000. I've got, I don't know, maybe 100 left. I've gone through so many zip ties, but for me, that's the best way to like keep everything organized, right? I've also gotten a lot better with my color coding of wiring, kind of following the advice from the guys at Fast Pinball Hardware, the way that they do it. And really what it just comes down to, right, is there's different schools of thought. Another guy there really likes to have an even higher variety of colors than I have here. But I think the main thing when you're doing your final wiring, try to go through before I put on these hardware controller boards and like the boards for the Optos, try to go through and think about, okay, what's going to be kind of like the natural flow of your mechs and things? Where do you want kind of those arteries? Right? Think of your wiring harness like a circulatory system in your body, right? You're gonna have your arteries, you're gonna have then your smaller arteries and veins and capillaries, whatever, you know what I mean, right? But just take a minute to plan through and figure out. I had this thing in Photoshop that I'll throw up maybe really, really fast, that I just went through and had a picture of this on my rotisserie and just really roughly just kind of drew, okay, blue's my high voltage wires. All right, where's my main high voltage need to come in? Well, I want something that's gonna come in from the back and go along all these mechs, of course, probably right. Something's gonna go along on these mechs. Another thing for up here. On your power filter board for fast hardware, you've got 3 high voltage capacitors. 2 of them are kind of connected, all right? And there's a third one that can either be for a totally separate device, if you have like an AC motor or some DC motor or something else going on, or if you don't have any of those, if they're all just like solenoids, make sure you're using that. It's a whole other capacitor that's on there. And so I've got like a separate capacitor for my lower third for everything, and then I've got the other 2 lines split up between the rest of my drop targets. I'm actually got a lot of drop targets, right? Trying to kind of distribute the load, and not just between the number of mechs, but also thinking about okay, what's the likelihood of these mechs being fired kind of all at the same time, right? All my flippers can be getting fired at the same time, so I want those kind of either on their own line, or since I have them spread across the play field, I want them split across different high voltage lines, so they're not all drawing from the same capacitor. When you're sitting there holding those flipper buttons and you're just sucking up the energy out of those capacitors, are you just going to completely drain it so there's nothing left for when something else needs to fire? All those things are considerations to think about as you're planning out the wiring of where you're going to have power to make sure you have equal power distribution, trying to split up those three capacitors as equally as you can for what's going to be the most common gameplay, right? I've got a couple of drop targets and things in the upper playfield that, like, there's 4 of them there, but like in my game, you're not going to get the upper playfield like all the time. You'll get it periodically, and they're not going to be getting fired as much as the other. Like my 4-bank drop target set over here, that's 4-bank. That's going to be getting a lot of action. I've been noticing in my play testing. So anyway, think about things like that. Have a dedicated color for your high voltage power. Have a dedicated line for your 12-volt power for all my optos. Have a that's for me, that's yellow. Well, you can see that here. This is my harness for my high voltage. All right, so I've got blue for my high voltage, I've got yellow for my 12-volt, and I've got red for my 5-volt. And you're going to have a few items that take 5-volt, like this 4-bank mech has 5 volts for its first board here. I've got 5 volts going for the optos in the trough that Pinball Live sent. That needs its own 5-volt. Then all the LED needs 5 volts. Let's take a minute and talk a little bit more about power for that. So when you're going through and doing your lighting, at least if you're using fast, and their nano board here in the back that drives all the lighting, you've got 4 different places on the old nano board, and their newer neuron board is designed in an even better setup, and you get separate expansion boards for lighting. So there's no limit really on the number of lights you can have in the newer setup. In the older setup, there's a limit, but it's pretty dang high. Anyway, but they're sending out 5 volts per each one of those lines. They can hold up like 64 LEDs. Well, 64 LEDs pulling 5 volts, by the time you get to the end of the chain, they've kind of sucked up the 5 volts and you're having voltage drop, and so you can get weird kind of ghosting and different behavior with your LEDs. So what they suggest is about every 20 LEDs, insert 5 volts again. So I've got another 5-volt line running from the back that's separate from that taps in about every 20 LEDs, putting a couple at the end also, just to kind of make sure there's even power running through them, okay? So they work well and they don't flicker all weird. So high voltage, 12-volt, 5-volt for mechs, and then think about your lighting, think about those power needs, and again, think about where those are at and how you want to kind of run those around. You're going to be hopping and daisy chaining from light to light, right? So I went through, I did all my lighting first. Those are kind of the shorter, lower wires. Then I went through and printed off some of these little wire standoffs from my 3D printer once I finally got it working, and did what I could to kind of keep the high voltage wiring, which is kind of underneath here in the black and blue, all those ground returns, those toxic ground returns in my power lines, up higher, so they're not going through and affecting and causing interference with the LED lighting. If you have a lot of like high voltage 12 and especially the 48-volt lines running in parallel to your 5-volt control lines for your LEDs, that can cause interference and cause weird things to go on also. So if you do have to have them close, they're saying is keep your high voltage high away from the playfield, your low voltage lower, so the lighting stays a little bit lower. Even zip tied a few of my longer cords to try to kind of keep them down. Keep that lower. Keep your high voltage at the top of these towers here, higher away from your playfield to minimize that. If you do have wires running in parallel, try to do what you can to actually have them go at like a 90 degree. They cut across once versus going along. That's going to minimize the interference also. So keep that in mind. And then all the orange and the purple are, for me, all the switch returns. Now, I was saying before, some people like to go through and have not just all the high voltage be blue. They want to go through and have, okay, high voltage for this flipper versus high voltage for that one. Or so now I have different colors for each of those. Or instead, I have all my control lines, all my grounds that are going back to my control boards and back to my toxic ground, all just black. And some people might, hey, how do you know which one of these is which? Okay, well, 2 reasons. One, I know because I know where they go inside these actual pin-out connectors, right? I have all of these gone through and documented in a spreadsheet where I know exactly every board and every switch input and every driver input. I know exactly which one is which, okay? So I know, oh, this is board 0, spot 00 for the driver. I look at my spreadsheet, oh, I know what that drives. Plus, every one of these down here is pretty clear. I've got quick disconnects I put in for every single one of my mechs. I'm hoping all the quick disconnects on my mechs are going to make it easier for me to go through and do my final transfer from this playfield to the one with artwork. I have to take all this off. So all the zip ties will hopefully kind of keep this relatively in order of how things are, okay? And then being able to go through and disconnect all my mechs so I can kind of pull off my wiring. A bunch of my switches are all soldered to that, right? But I can pull off my wiring and my switches, kind of set that down, and then go through, undo all my lighting wiring, and then take off all my mechs and then repopulate. Hoping that's not going to take me almost 2 weeks like it did for me to go through and do all of this. It took me a while, guys. I mean, just nights and weekends, but it was a lot more hours than I thought it was going to be. But I'm pleased with how it turned out. It's not, you know, absolute wire porn, the most tidiest thing in the world, but if you saw from where I started, from my old wiring harnesses and how they looked, I think one of these here was from this was from the ball trough. That one's still kind of organized. You can see my ball troughs I'm very proud of. My ball troughs always turn out really nice, but they're kind of isolated, easy to do that. But the rest of it is just kind of got out of control, and there's no real clear arteries. Got a little bit of here is like a main power coming in, but it was, yeah, not as well thought out. As much as I spent a whole video thinking about it and trying to make it organized, it did not turn out that well in the end. So yeah, try transferring this across from one plate to the field to the next. That's a nightmare. All right, how many minutes in are we? Getting close to that 15-minute mark, huh? All right, so just keep things organized. Have a system. I don't think it really matters exactly what colors and what your system is, just so long as you know it and you have a system. So you know, oh, these are all my switch wires, the purple are my switch returns, you know, kind of keep things grouped, okay? Just to keep things nice and neat so you can still get in here and work on it, right? If I need to go through and find a screw and mess with this lighting, if I have my wire just crisscrossing everywhere like this giant web, you're not gonna be able to get in and work on it and make any changes you might need to do, right? Because I mean, come on, this is gonna be kind of a living organism. Yes, I hope to get it done in time for Expo to play, but I might still, maybe I'll throw a magnet in here. I left some space in between here. I can maybe fit in a magnet if I want a magnet in there to add to the gameplay, right? Or who knows what else you might need to go through and do. So anyway, more organization. You take a little time up front. It's gonna save you down the road, right? All right, let's see, what else? I've gone through and I've added a board here into the cabinet. Let me bring you in a little closer, show you what I got going on there. There you can see. So this is an 0804 board that came with my starter bundle from Fast. So I wasn't really sure what I was gonna do. 804, that means 8 switches, 4 coil drivers. I'm like, that's so small, what am I really gonna use that for? I had so many switches for everything else. Then I thought, oh, I don't have a separate cabinet board. Maybe if I can use that. And so if I limit it to just my flipper inputs, okay, the door switch to make sure I have my power cut off when the door's off, my start switch, the lighting for that, I ended up going with an action button lockdown bar, so I added a switch in there. I had to 3D print a little bracket for that, but it worked out well. Anyway, so we've got our switches, and we've got like a service button input. We're gonna have our tilt bob. I still have to put that one in, so this wire is hanging loose here waiting for that. You know, all those come in here and can be isolated. I don't have to worry about running wires all the way back into one of the things in the main, you know, in the main play field. So that saves me a bunch. I do have one wire here running to the back, as you'll see, and that wire is just the one that connects to the coin door to make sure that the power gets switched off. It goes all the way back to the power filter board. And then I've also got, you know, the Ethernet here, right? And I've got the sets where I've got some quick disconnects right here from my play field. And so we come in on the yellow and we're going through up to this board, back to this board. This guy runs all the way back out and then down around to the 0804. This guy's got a long cable then all the way back that runs up through the back box. If you can see it, here into my Nano. That's where the brains of everything is. Hope you can see that. It's kind of dark. Anyway, so again, just trying to keep things organized. I sanded down these corners here, so the new modern Stern lockdown bar that I'm borrowing that doesn't have the sharp corners, so it fits in this old Williams cabinet. Okay, so that goes in there good. We've got an action bar that works on that button. We're getting so good. Oh, and then I moved all the power supplies. A couple of you made comments about this earlier, and you were dead on. I had my power supplies all down in the cabinet when I very first started, because if you remember when I very first started my build, I didn't have my back box put together whatsoever, so I didn't really have any place to put it. It was just the bottom cabinet. And so my power supplies were all down here in the cabinet, and I just put a piece of cardboard over to make sure no screws fell on it when I was testing, right? Well, now I've done the safer thing. I've moved all that up here into the back like I showed you at the very beginning, right? Okay, so everything's up there and safe, out of the way. I still have room to go through and add a strip of lighting in here and along here. If I need to, I maybe move these down a little bit more to center the lighting. But yeah, we'll have lighting through here that'll light up the translite. We've got our screen. Be careful with this little HDMI controller board you see in my parts list. Remember guys, every single one of my videos in the description I have a link, a spreadsheet that has links out to everything I purchased, okay? Now some of them I purchased 3 or 4 versions of because I was experimenting, right? And I only have them listed once for like kind of the final bill of materials, right? But here's the HDMI controller for this screen. Since this is kind of all separate, it wasn't like a full screen that was all enclosed like you'll see in the back box of a Stern. You've got these cables here that's kind of loose. I haven't figured out the best way to protect them yet. I need to come up with some little 3D printed shroud that can kind of go over this and help protect it. Because these little connectors back here are pretty delicate. When I was messing around, I ended up busting it, had to get a new cable. Anyways, just take your time, be careful. Let's talk about the playfield for a minute. So I posted up a video or a picture of this in Facebook. If you're not part of Jake Danzig, the primary moderator of the Strictly Custom Pinballs Facebook group, I strongly encourage you to go in there. There's so many people doing awesome things with their own pinball builds, posting pictures, sharing videos, and sharing progress to show where they're at. And when I posted this picture, several comments about how steep this right ramp was. Might be the steepest ramp in all of pinball history. We'll see. I'm quite pleased with it. It's working really good. And then there's also a really good comment made, which I'd forgotten about, instead of just having posts here to kind of protect these ramps in this area, to maybe go through and put in some more stand-up targets. So I experimented with that. You'll see some ugly white JB weld in here because I went through and I tried that. I cannot get these two to fit without doing one of two things. This one on this side was running into the flipper mech here underneath where I had to orient the flipper mech. So I can't get around that to put one here. This one is able to put one in, but then it's just kind of lopsided, and I just don't really have anything planned out for the modes for the stand-up, so I'm going to put them all back just to posts. The primary, or the other issue I had with it, not only was this running into the flipper mech, but even I could put it in here, like the width of the entrances of these ramps are pretty important to make sure these shots are actually makeable. This ramp is really steep and it's a funky angle. So this opening is about 68 millimeters wide, which is really wide, right? But it's kind of a tight angle and you're hitting at an angle. So technically it's actually a little bit narrower than that. It's more like around 54, I think I measured. You're like the actual angle you have to make it in here, even though the opening is not exactly lined up to it. So I didn't block this horseshoe shot. This ramp here is 48. Which is a good size. It's very makeable from the left. You can even backhand it from the right if you're doing it just right. Putting targets in here, these things are 12 millimeters across versus a post is like 6 or 8 with the rubber. And so it started to encroach on that and started to make the shot into my orbit narrower. It made the entrance into my ramp narrower. It was kind of cutting off the ability to backhand into the spinner really easily. It's like either I encroach on the ramp or I stick it to the left, and then my shots are kind of tight. I don't want to like go through and like Houdini this whole thing and make all my shots so tight that like you have to really, really get dialed in and practice the game a whole lot to be able to make those shots. Because again, the reality is this game is never going to be mass produced. It's a Led Zeppelin theme, which I don't have the rights to, and Stern's already done a good pinball machine on that, right? And so it's just going to be sitting in my house, be taken around to local tournaments here in Utah to have other people play it. So like no one's going to be able to like really master this game, right? Play hours and hours on it. And so I want it a little bit easier to make the shots so people can just get in right away and have fun with it. Now, they're not all gimmies. These drop targets over here from this is a pretty tight little shot also. So these two are pretty hard to make. The left orbit can be a little bit tricky. I think there's enough chaos between the pop bumpers and the lower third. It's pretty pinball-y. It's bouncing around a lot. Anyway, whatever. We'll get into gameplay when I actually turn it on and start playing the dang thing. Hopefully it all works well. But needless to say, I did hear your suggestions. I gave them a try. Even destroyed my my final play field, screwing around, drilling into it, and I don't see that part working. So thank you for the suggestion, but I think I'm just gonna have to go back to post right now. And if I had more time, if I wasn't in a rush to get this ready for Expo and could do a whole nother Whitewood, maybe I'd iterate on it again further. The other thing I'm really excited about, which I can't wait to have it in on the final play field, is I did take out the clear acrylic that I have for the upper play field. If you remember from my other videos, I said I'm gonna etch in the Icarus figure into that. And I set it in here, it lines up perfectly. All the holes are perfect. Been able to practice drilling into it and securing the drop targets on the back. Everything there is gonna work great. The last big thing I gotta figure out is what to do about this back box and how to get this to kind of play in my whole theme about it looking like a concert on a stage, because this is gonna be your backstage pass shot. You're gonna make it up here, the diverter's gonna open, you'll come up here to this upper play field. This is going to be like the balcony of the venue, right? Make it up here for Super Jackpot. I need to integrate it a little bit more into the artwork on the play field. I've got some artwork that I'm really liking. I threw it out to my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much to all of you guys. Got 16 Patreon supporters still. Room for plenty more. But thank you so much, guys. Next thing I got to do is go through and get a nice thank you up here in the screen for all of you guys. Okay, I'm well over 15 minutes, I think. I'm lying to myself already, but all right, there. I did my best to keep it short and sweet. There's a lot going on. There's still so much left to do. I got to get my staircase in. We've got to make sure all this is working correctly like it was in my virtual setup. So I'm trying to update my laptop and get everything running. That'll be later today. I'll record that. Hopefully it all works really good first time. I know I've got the 2 boards down here, the 16/16 boards. And I can't remember when I was going through on these 2 boards, they both have 16 switches and 16 drivers, so they're called 16/16 boards. And when I was messing around with that diverter a year ago, I did not have a diode protecting the coil, so I kept burning out drivers. One of these has 1 driver burned out, the other one has 3 drivers burned out. And I have no extra drivers now on my board, so I can't burn out anything else. And I forget which one's which. So I numbered these pin headers here, so if I go through and test and nothing's happening, I'll know I need to reverse them. Anyway, we're gonna go through and test out all of that. Whew. All right, what else is there to say? That's enough, that's a lot. I'm really pleased with where things are at. There's still a lot more work to do. I've got a bundle of LEDs sitting down here because these are all LEDs that are gonna go along that back board as like spotlights for the concert. I've got to figure that out. It is August 17th, I said right? And so we've got 2 months until Expo. And I've got a vacation coming up next week for a week I'm gonna be out. The week after, the last week of August I'm out. Got a couple other trips for different things with family going on, so I'm losing some weekends. I've only got about 3 or 4 more weeks to work on this, so we've got to get artwork printed, we've got to get it tested. There's a lot to do, but we're committed. Hotels booked, flights booked, we're gonna be at Expo, okay? So if you're anywhere near the Chicago area, you think about going to Expo, if you're gonna be there, please come through, try to find the homebrew area. I think it's gonna be kind of its own area sectioned off from the main floor, which I don't love, but they're doing their best to give us a good spot so we can all fit in there. So come find us. There's gonna be a lot of homebrew games there to play, not just mine. I'm excited to try out everybody's, rub shoulders, meet with all of you. Yeah. All right, more than 15 minutes. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Thank you for all of your support, all of your comments. Sorry it's been so long. I'm gonna try to keep up on the videos better from here on out. And yeah, wish me luck. We'll catch you next time, guys. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.